Core way I've always evaluated whether I want to make a change or not has always been, am I still growing and learning? My partners and my team are giving me the ability to continue to get more rope that I can hang myself with, which I think is really important to be able to grow, right?
Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special today.
Only a mother could invest in
this idea.
Made this like super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
True startup story, guys. You got it. Your company just got seed round financed. Congratulations. You're going to the moon. But now you have to scale. You found great talent out in California, New York, Georgia, and even Eastern Europe. So what communications platform will you be using to ensure your international team is always aligned? Well, the answer is easy. Slack.com for Teams. We've used Slack for all of our previous startups, and they've supported us in tremendous ways. And we want to give them a thanks today for supporting vchunting.com. Did you also know that Slack is a great tool for personal use? Yeah, I use my own personal Slack channel to drop in documents, notes, to-dos, and follow-ups to ensure that my workflow throughout the day is right on course. I promise you, if you try out slack.com for personal use, you'll end up using it for your team as well. Go to slack.com to check it out. Welcome everybody to the second season of VC Hunting with me, your host, Peter Saddington. I am super excited for the conversation we're going to have today. It is with FREDERIK Groce, who is an investor at Storm Ventures, an introduction from Ryan Floyd at Storm Ventures as well. FREDERIK, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. I got to sneak in through the good old partner intro, which is always the best way to do it.
It is the best way to do it, and it's a little self-serving, but it's okay. But it's great because it just shows the power of network. But let's just get right into the meat and potatoes here. Tell us, FREDERIK, tell us about the tale of you getting into venture capital, number one, and number two, what impact? So this is something that kind of rose in my gut as I was doing research around you, because it seems like you're really focused on a couple of things. We're going to talk about it, but the word impact came into my mind. So I'll repeat the question. What's the tale of you getting into venture capital, number one? And number two, what type of impact do you want to have while you're here?
I love it. Yeah. So my story breaking into venture is a little bit unique in the sense that, I never set out to say, hey, looking in the mirror, I want to be a VC at all. I graduated from Stanford, and my first job at school was really actually running something called Stanford Student Enterprises, which, is this phenomenal role, kind of this weird kind of company. And to sum it up, it's effectively a nonprofit that was built many years ago to house and manage the finances of student groups and student government at Stanford. And that might sound sort of small, but it's actually a pretty big operation. The students at Stanford have accumulated over the years well over $18 million of assets. And those assets get allocated in a variety of ways. One, they're allocated to ensure the long-term sustainability of the association. But the second way is to give students an entrepreneurial experience on campus. And so that kind of got developed over time because at Stanford, if you're an undergrad, you're bright, you're young, and a lot of folks want to get into business, but you can't study business. Stanford's a liberal arts education. They push a lot of other areas, which are phenomenal, but you can't, do a business degree. And so Stanford Student Enterprise sort of emerged over the years to be the practical way to get a business degree at Stanford. And so,
from what I understand, I've talked with other VCs about this particular program. They've used the word actually, I can't remember who I was talking to, but they used the word accelerator. Is it more of an accelerator?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the organization has a number of different sort of enterprises or business units, so to speak. And one of them is an accelerator, and that's called Coronal Ventures. And then there used to be another one called StartX. That's so successful that we were able to spin it out as a separate entity itself. And it's kind of gone on to do incredible things since the spin out. And so long story short, I've been working there as an undergrad student, learning business because, that's why I was interested in at least getting exposure to that side of the world. And as I graduated, the CEO role, which is always set aside for a recent Stanford grad, came up. So I put my name in the hat. pitched why I thought I would be the right pick to lead the organization, got the job. And in so doing, ended up getting a lot of exposure to the venture community. I studied political science in undergrad, so I wasn't really necessarily touching a lot of tech per se in the traditional sort of way someone might think about it. And when that job was coming up to an end, which was sort of the end of the 2 years that I ran that, I was sort of looking at what I wanted to do next. And, ironically, I got lucky. I went to a mentor and asked, hey, what do you think I should do? You know my skill set. You followed me over the last few years. And, him, along with one other person, said, hey, have you thought about venture capital? And I was like, venture? Sure. I know VCs because of the work we're doing, but I'd never really thought of myself as an investor. And I was like, why? Why do you think I'd be good for that? And sort of listening to him explain, what a VC does really sort of changed my understanding of what venture capital was fundamentally. And that pushed me to thinking. And so then I ended up meeting a couple funds, met Storm Ventures. And after sort of evaluating a number of venture funds, decided Storm was the place I wanted to be. And one of the key reasons I chose Storm was sort of, I guess, twofold. One was I had a kind of a contrarian thesis that I was interested in investigating.
Ooh, tell me more.
Yeah, so I was interested in this idea of GovTech, so software to help governments run more efficiently. Studied political science, I'd been around this whole ecosystem. I'd started to see some of these early stage government companies, like Palantir, OpenGov, Emerge, Stanford grads were working in these companies. So I was curious to say, hey, is there more that could be done there? And I was approaching it from an enterprise investment perspective because I looked at government and said, hey, what is the largest enterprise known to man? Well, governments. They're fundamentally not going away, and they're large organizations that run just like large enterprises in many ways. And so the question was, could I find a fund that would at least allow me to investigate that thesis? And then the second one for me was, which was really important, was could I find a fund that would allow me to effectively take the privilege that I was accumulating over time and use that to have impact, right? And so from the get-go, I had, a core sort of thing that I was seeing was, I was gaining this privilege. I grew up low income. Stanford was this first opening of privilege that I suddenly had. And at the core of me, I always asked this question of as I accumulate this privilege, what can I do with it? And Storm was one of the few funds where I found partners that were actually taking their privilege and doing things. One of my partners, Ryan, was doing work with Code 2040. I had a partner, Tehi, who was putting together the foundation of a book around building enterprise companies because his thought was, hey, a book is a great way to take the knowledge I've gained over the years in my career and bring it out to the masses. And so I saw that as part of the core kind of pieces of this firm. Now, at that time, I didn't know what I was going to do yet. Fast forward to today, it's pretty easy. I started Black VC, which we might get to touch here. But at that point, I was really just looking for a firm that culturally, lived up to that sort of expectation of, as you accumulate this privilege, how do you use it to help others out there in the ecosystem?
Wow. Well, what a great story. And it's not dissimilar to many. However, it is yours. And that's what makes it special. I want to unpack a couple things first and foremost. I love this idea that you brought up, and I think it's talked about, but I just love the fact that you brought it up in this particular conversation, the idea of mentor, and that you asked, and at least you had enough, wherewithal and self-awareness that you should talk to your mentor and ask them what they think about you. And so here, and what you should do. And so my question is what would you say to a young entrepreneur that doesn't have a mentor, a young college grad that doesn't have a mentor? Should they get one? Should they find one so that they can have another voice into their system and give them more ideas and opportunities about their life? What would you say would be the value of a mentor for you? And how has that benefited you as you are today?
Yeah, the funny thing is, the way I look at it is people sometimes get, I think, caught up with the idea of the ask, right? I want someone to be my mentor. It's sort of like a role, it's like, asking someone to join your family, your career family. I think the number one thing I tell people all the time, and this is something I live, is don't ask. Every person you meet has the opportunity to be a mentor to you. The key is ask them questions, engage with them, find ways to come back to them and show that you're growing and that they're helping you in some way. And make sure from the get-go, you're also asking and trying to find ways in which you can help support them. And so I have a lot of mentors, the mentor, I was talking about earlier, helped me evaluate, whether I wanted to break into venture. This was just the dad of my college roommate. You know, he was a successful tech entrepreneur. He'd raised venture dollars. And, you know, I've had lots of conversations with him over my time. You know, we ended up, my roommate and I lived together for 3 years, became my best friend. And so, you know, he may not have known he was my mentor, but he was. And at the end of the day, I think that's the key is, you know, there doesn't have to be this formal ask. It's just around asking people questions that can help you and just engaging them, because people want to use their expertise to help people. People are intrinsically, generally very open to supporting and helping younger people, particularly. And so, you know, I think that's the key. It's just, you have to kind of get out of your own way a little bit with it.
I love that. I love that. And it harkens me back to one of the best pieces of advice that my father gave me when I was young. He basically just said, Peter, asking is always free. And
That's right.
So you should ask all the time. Well,
There's no dumb question. There's no dumb question. You know, in venture, my job, I always tell people, like, I'm a fancy question, you know, asker. Like my job is to ask insightful questions. And so there is no dumb question.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's move on here a little bit. We do a little bit of digging here at VC Hunting, and
it's always scary. A scary beginning.
Well, I guess you saw the Ryan Floyd interview. I was digging with him, and he was like, "Oh man, you didn't prep me for these types of questions." But I did some digging, and I found your Hello World Medium blog post on April 7th, 2016 on your Medium called Millennial VC, which I really love the name, which I want to talk about for a sec in a little bit here. But in your Hello World blog post on April 7th, 2016, you said 3 weeks ago, I started with Storm Ventures. Mm-hmm. And I realized how little I actually knew.
Yep.
And so here's the question. Now that you joined them back in April or so of 2016, till now, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned at Storm Ventures?
Yeah. You know, that's a great question. You know, at that point, you know, when I said that, you know, I was in this moment of just feeling like I was completely underwater, you know, like
drinking from a fire hose, right?
Yeah. You know, like industry, you know, I think finance and business, you know, is notorious to an extent, and academia is similar to this in that there's a lot of jargon. And I didn't know how to engage with sort of the work in some ways, because I had to learn a whole new language. And so, you know, one of the things I had to learn was the language. But I think, you know, the biggest thing that I have learned really is how to quickly provide value in an empathetic way. Just to say, you know, it's not always about creating a transactional value proposition to, you know, a founder or an investor that I meet, but it's about providing empathetic value. And so what that means to me is helping connect with that individual on a human level and finding a way to help them in any way possible. It doesn't have to be a business related thing, but just understanding, hey, how can I help you as another human? And sometimes it might just be a conversation that might be just de-stressing a little bit and, you know, thinking about, hey, here are the pitfalls, here are the challenges sometimes, or it could actually be more business transactional oriented, but just trying to find a way to be empathetic to individuals. And that's something, you know, all my partners here and our team, you know, really internalizes as a firm. And that's really, I think, helped me, you know, be a stronger investor and quite frankly, a stronger networker as well.
Well, you would actually be one of the statistical anomalies in terms of millennials joining companies and then leaving relatively early within the life cycle in that company. You've been there since 2016. So that actually makes you statistically somewhat of an anomaly, a statistical outlier of sorts. So I had to ask, now I wrote this question and I have to ask it, is what's the stickiness? What's the stickiness factor? What kept you here at Storm Ventures? Was it the culture? Was it the people? Was it the work? What was the stickiness that kept you here and continuing to invest your career, your time, and your skill sets into Storm Ventures, and what do you look forward to in the future with them?
Yeah, you know, so the core way I've always evaluated whether I want to make a change or not has always been, am I still growing and learning? You know, and so I've always felt that I'm learning and growing here as a firm, and that my partners and my team are giving me the ability to continue to get more rope that I can hang myself with, which I think is really important to be able to grow, right? You have to take these risks on yourself, betting on yourself.
I love it.
And I've always felt that exists here. I think as it relates to other funds, I also believe my partners invest their time and energy in really mentoring me. You know, you talk to a lot of junior investors. One of the things you'll hear a lot is that venture partners are horrible people managers, you know, that they're not great at helping you grow as an individual. I've never felt that way at my firm. I've always felt like my team takes the time and effort to help me become the better, employee, investor, person. And that's really important to me. And that's one of the things I hope to continue to see happen here. And that's what keeps me at the firm, long term. I think any junior investment professional is always evaluating, hey, how do I become a partner? How do I get to the top, right? And I would be, I'd be, giving you I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't thinking of that and asking that question. The great thing for me is I feel like I have that ability here, over time, if I continue to execute. And there are clear things, obviously, that I have to do and achieve, to be, prepared and ready for a role like that. But, ultimately, that's the long term. I think the other thing that really does keep me here is the fact that my team allows me to do impact, right? And to leverage the privilege that I'm accumulating to help provide more value to the broader community. And that's really been through Black VC. I remember, 2.5 years ago when I came to my partners about this idea of building an organization to build networks within the Black venture community so that we could help each other be more successful, grow, and also create a beacon of light for junior people who want to break into venture and make it easier for them. My partners didn't laugh at me. They were like, this is phenomenal that you're thinking about this. How can we help you? Not a lot of teams that would have done that. They let me get in front of my LPs, the firm's LPs, and talk about what we were doing and why I thought that was important. Not a lot of firms have done that. And that's ultimately, I think, one of the reasons I feel blessed to be at this firm and continue to be excited every day that I come in to, come in and help find deals and invest and work besides, phenomenal people.
Did you know that there's even more value than just audio or video? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at VC Hunting, and make sure to sign up for the VC Hunting newsletter, where you'll be able to get weekly news on venture capital, startups, founder stories, and the occasional wisdom extracted from Peter's brain. Go to vchunting.com to sign up. And now back to the episode.
Well, I love the fact that Storm Ventures allows you to expand yourself, expand your knowledge, pursue interests that are congruent and aligned with the company, but aligned more to your passions, your desires. So let's talk about that for a second. But I want to qualify it just a little bit. On March 29th, 2019, on your Millennial VC blog, you wrote a post about personal branding, which I really, really appreciate reading. So it wasn't too long ago. You said that your brand hasn't been crafted just yet. And this was about 9 months ago or so now. You said that your brand hasn't been crafted just yet. The first question is, has it? Have you crafted it now? And maybe that's a great segue into Black VC. And you also asked the question around who on IG or Instagram is doing this well. And so the second question is have you found anyone that's doing it well? So tell me more and tell the audience more, because we got a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, and venture capitalists who listen to this. Tell us more about the value of personal branding and why that's something that is really close to your heart. And then segue into what's going on with Black VC and who's doing personal branding well.
Yeah. So, it's funny. So I've thought about this a lot, right? Brand and reputation. These are two things that I often think about. And I look at it as sort of, reputation is what others around you think about you. And the brand is sort of, what you're trying to project out there to the world, right? In an ideal world, they're authentic and they align, but sometimes they don't, right? And it got me thinking a lot around like, hey, what am I putting out there? And am I being purposeful with the content and the things that I'm putting out there, right? Or is it just sort of happening, haphazard? And it was really my fiance that actually drove me to think about this more. She's, put a lot of time and effort into her Instagram sort of following and what she's been doing. And it was just a fascinating lens into sort of her perspective, trying to build something at the ground. And so I was like thinking about that from a venture standpoint. In the VC world, there's, individuals that people follow because they build interesting brands. People like to engage with those brands. And at the time, when I was building, I was, asking this question of like, what is my brand? What are the things that people, think that I'm putting out there? And is that aligning with the reputation? If you were to ask someone, oh, what is Frederick doing? What are those aligned? And I started to think about what are the incremental pieces, right? And at that point, I think this is still true today. There was, the investment verticals that I spent a lot of time in, right? So that could be vertical SaaS, that was GovTech, that was investing outside of the Bay Area. And I was thinking, am I doing a good job of like authentically talking and telling stories about that, right? And then the second piece was really around sort of, the stuff I'm doing with Black VC, right? Providing an kind of a focus around the lack of equality that that exists within the broader tech ecosystem, but then more specifically in venture capital, and asking these questions like, hey, how did we get to where we are today? And what are we doing as a community to change, the status quo? Which is to say, there's very few African Americans in this industry, right? 1% of total investment professionals in the United States are African American. And it's something that, I kind of fell into realizing existed, kind of going through my own discovery of looking actually for mentors and people who've gone before me, because I'm a big believer that, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And our job is to figure out who are those giants and how can we engage with them and have them help us become even bigger ourselves as well. And so, through that journey, kind of started to realize that there was just a lack of connectivity and some problems, and no one really talking about those problems to an extent. And I had the benefit of seeing All Raise, which has been an incredible movement around creating more equity and opportunities for women in the venture landscape. And they, in many ways, create sort of the first wave that I got to kind of just jump right behind and say, hey, look, All Raise is doing great work, but there's also other communities that we need to be talking about as well. It's not just a single-pronged effort, At the end of the day, diversity is a complex topic that we all need to be unpacking. And so, going back to that post, I was asking this question, like, hey, am I being purposeful with it? And if I fast forward to today, I think I'm doing a better job of, making sure there's a level of sort of consistency. I'd say, the thing that I'm still struggling with is building brand sort of requires a willingness to, I think, talk about your own wins more aggressively. And it's something I'm actually, sometimes I'm comfortable with talking about, like in being the raw person. I'm someone who generally prefers to build the reputation, do the hard work, and not worry about the brand. But what I've seen is that, as, media becomes a bigger and bigger role in the venture landscape, being willing to, I think, engage proactively and tell a story is actually going to be very important for investors to find founders in, all areas of the country and the world. Because as we invest, not just in Silicon Valley anymore, being able to use mediums and, media to engage and talk to founders all over the world is increasingly important. And it's something I'm thinking about every day. I'd say I still have a long way to go. But, hey, even engaging today with you, Peter, is a big part of me trying to be more proactive about that.
Exactly. And this is the fastest growing daily show on the planet when it comes to venture media. So we're getting you out to China.
There you go.
We're syndicating you to China, Singapore, Japan, Korea. So they're going to hear about FREDERIK Groce from Storm Ventures. Now, one thing that I really loved and I really appreciated, FREDERIK, is as I was watching you communicate this is kind of I wouldn't say kind of, but the tension that I kind of see in your countenance as you're communicating, because it tells me that you're really, I wouldn't say struggling, but you're really trying to figure out the right balance. And I wrote this down. You said, I want to be purposeful with my brand and reputation versus haphazard, but at the same time, there's this idea around social, around over curation, where it's like, my Instagram is just the highlights of my life and my life looks perfect and everything is curated and everything's in line. And so how do you find the balance between an overly curated brand versus the reputation versus not being authentic? I can clearly see, and by the way, I'm in the same boat here. I struggle with all the multi-pronged facets of this idea. But what have you found to be the best balance between brand, reputation, being purposeful, but also being authentic? I know it's a tough question, might be a tough question to answer.
No, it's a good one. I think for me, it actually comes down to, how authentic are you willing to be? How vulnerable are you willing to be? And I think of authenticity and vulnerability sort of hand in hand. And I think that's the challenge. I think, media and social media makes it really difficult sometimes to be vulnerable. If I look back, when I was on Facebook in high school, Facebook was a place people were actually vulnerable. People would talk about the pain that they were experiencing, and that really disappeared. right? And I try to strive to be authentic and vulnerable in the conversations. Why I'm open to talking about things that are sometimes painful, right? You know, I mentioned at the beginning, right? I came from a low-income background. Well, you know, that's something that we don't get to talk about. You certainly don't hear venture investors talking about that perspective, but it informs a viewpoint on the world. It lets me think about, I think, deals and opportunities others might not, right? Blue collar roles and how technology can help blue collar Americans manage and build and be successful in the businesses they do versus technology replacing them and, you know, creating fear. And I think it's really about how vulnerable are you okay with being? And the challenge is that media today, particularly with like the amount of trolls that exist out there, have really made it hard, I think, for people to be vulnerable, right? Like saying and putting your heart out there is being harder and harder.
It's not rewarding in many ways. It's not rewarding to be authentic and vulnerable because people are like, yeah, you suck. It's like, get over it.
But if you look at the most successful, you know, like the Kardashians, so to speak, right? What have they've been extremely vulnerable. They have shown parts of their life that people, you know, might love, hate, not understand, you know, dream about doing. And I think we're going to come back to that. I think being vulnerable is key to building authentic human connections. You can't build a true bond or connection with someone if you're not willing to be vulnerable. And I think that's something all of us are going to come back around to, because I think there's going to be a backlash against this curation of an image on its own. And I think ultimately those who are willing to be authentic and vulnerable with their audiences are going to disproportionately win against everybody else. And I think it's one of the things that, you know, people love about viewing your show. You know, you are authentically yourself. You're not scared to ask questions that are probing, that might be more vulnerable. And you share stories about yourself as well throughout, you know, the videos you're putting. And I think that's what, you know, audiences like to engage with at the end of the day.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the authenticity and the honesty and candor of your answer. You know, it's one of those things that I've struggled with for years of should I choose a particular medium for this message versus should I just be authentic and real across all platforms. And so this is my answer. I don't know if it's the right answer, but I have found that there are certain platforms that it's just, this is the one that's okay for me. And I feel comfortable being in the real. And these are the ones where I'm okay with curating it a bit. And so I don't know if that's the right answer, but we certainly have enough platforms out there that you can pick and choose and over time figure your way through it. And
Absolutely.
So I think it requires a little bit of kind of self-awareness and some retrospection of like, you know, what do I really want to portray? And I think at the end of the day, as long as you're constantly having, just like you said, authentic conversations with people, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think it all comes together at the end of the day. I think as long as we come back to remembering, you know, we're all humans and we want to, you know, engage with everyone at that level to an extent. And if we don't forget that piece, I think then ultimately, you know, at least for me in the business of venture capital, where relationships are so paramount to the success of an individual, I think ultimately, you know, that will allow me to be successful long term.
I love it. Well, I want to dig into this question here a little bit. From all the research that I've done on you, your social, the Medium, the Twitters, all this fun stuff, I see you, Frederick, as being a great millennial example of a person of color who's in venture capital. And so I'm going to ask you this question. Being a person of color in venture capital and, you know, starting Black VC, trying to elevate the presence of minorities and people in this world, what do you think is the biggest thing that needs to change other than kind of the bland, oh, there needs to be more diversity, more women, more people of color? But let's talk specifics. What do you think just really just grinds your gears and needs to change when it comes to the diversity issue in venture capital today? Do you have an answer?
Yeah, you know, the biggest thing I think that we've forgotten to an extent, and I think, you know, this is maybe me, pushing against the industry as a whole, is I think many investors have forgotten how to build diverse networks and focusing on the hunt, right? I think at the end of the day, you know, networking and hunting should be a purposefully driven action, right? I'm deciding I want to go after an industry, a vertical, a group, whatever it is, there's a decision that gets made and then you force. I think because of how much easier it is to, you know, send a note out to an investor or, you know, the existing of sort of inbound deal flow itself has actually started to create a dynamic where a lot of investors are just used to sort of filtering an existing deal flow channel versus
Right.
actively going out and finding that next generation of great founders, entrepreneurs, and individuals or prospective investors. And so it's something we think about a lot. You know, to give you a really practical example of that, you know, one of the things we do at Black VC is we engage with employee resource groups, so ERGs at large tech companies. And so these could be women groups, Black groups. For us, it's generally Black groups. And we do events to mix that group with Black venture investors, right? And one of the things we found is that if you're a Black person working at a big tech company, whether you're an engineer, a product manager, you know, a marketer, the chances are you're doing what you have to do to maintain that success, the thing that got you there, which is heads down, work hard. And that's great. That's exactly what you should be doing. But that also means, though, many of those folks don't have actually networks or ties into the venture community. And it so happens that ultimately, if you want to raise money from a venture investor, it's about, do you have a network tie into that group or that individual? And that's not happening today because most people aren't proactively engaging those communities and networks. And so that's something we're always thinking about. What are the networks and communities that aren't being tapped into sufficiently? And how do we start to proactively engage in those? And I think across the industry, we need to see more and more of that. Because there's a lot of talent pools that exist that just aren't being tapped into and gone after. And I think that is going to be, you know, one of the most important things that we can do to help change the way, you know, the lack of diversity and inclusion that exists broadly in tech and venture capital.
I love it. And frankly, Frederick, I love the way that you posited this idea. And it clearly tells me that Black VC and other entities and other vehicles and other, you know, ideas like this are really serving a huge need. And I love the way that you posited is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what color you are, but if you're in a corporate position, you're doing what needs to be done so you can maintain it and keep going. But often, and you kind of a light bulb went off in my head when you said it, is often you don't spend much time at work networking, right? You're just working with your project manager, or other developers, engineers, QA, whatever, you know, product manager, and you don't spend a lot of time networking. So you really are serving a need because of the lack of an assertiveness and initiativeness of these employees. And it's not kind of any fault of their own. They're just trying to get by. So I love this idea that you're serving a need and helping connect and network people of color, and all different type of people together so that they can network, learn, grow, and obviously have opportunities emerge as well. Is that fair?
That's right. No, that's exactly the way I think about it. And you know, and it's one of the core things of like what, you know, I think venture capital used to be really good at, you know, it's like creating those purposeful networks.
I love it.
Hunting and finding that, right? And I think, you know, a lot of that, we just have to come back to it. And yeah, it's getting harder, right? Because the number of early stage companies has really grown. And so finding ways to do it efficiently is certainly, you know, something we all have to think about. Finding ways to do it creatively is something we all have to think about. But I think if we can go back to that, you know, I think that's how you start to really shift the needle around diversity and inclusion in the deals that we're seeing. You know, because at the end of the day, I don't buy it when people tell me that they can't find, you know, Black or women or, you know, Latinx.
I know. I don't believe that nonsense either. That's some crap.
Yeah, there's no pipeline problem. That just does. It's just not true today. Not in 2020. But what there is a lack of effort to hunt and be, you know, aggressive about that and unapologetic. And I think, you know, I'm seeing more and more people do that. And I think it's going to be driven by a whole new generation of investors, of millennial investors. I'm excited to be part of that demographic and leading the charge in some ways.
Well, I wrote something down that you said, and I don't know if this is kind of be your branding, your tagline, Frederick, but you said purpose-driven action. I just wrote PDA down because I liked it so much. So PDA, purpose-driven action. I love this idea. And if I can say, just from my gut, being fully authentic here, radically transparent here, I could totally see you crushing it. I could totally see you be a major player in the VC world, because I wouldn't say I'm a perfect judge of character, but you got a lot going for you, Frederick. So I'm excited for you. I am rooting for you, brother. I'm rooting for you. Even just spending, you know, a half hour talking with you here, man. I hope you have the most success, and you let me know. Please do let me know how I can help. So let's wind it out. I got one question left, and this is our fun question to wind us out. We do some digging on May 26, 2016, Frederick. So we're going way back on Twitter. Yep. We like to keep VCs accountable.
Love it.
On May 26, 2016, you said, lesson learned. Friends find it weird when you casually pull out a report on industrial IoT as casual coffee shop reading? What the hell is wrong with you, man?
Oh man, yeah.
That shit ain't kosher.
I know. That's one of the beauties of being in venture. Like I get to dig deep into sometimes abstract or small topics and try to get as knowledgeable as I can as I'm doing diligence. And
your friends don't appreciate it though.
My friends appreciate it. Yeah. A lot of my friends are nerds. A lot of my friends are #NerdNation. So Stanford grads and friends from school. And so absolutely, they found it a little bit bizarre, but they also appreciated it at the end of the day. And it's one of the things I love about this job is, I can go from industrial IoT to, how is the enterprise being consumerized, and how can consumer technology help the enterprise, engage more proactively and authentically with its employee population. And there's not a lot of jobs where you can go from that to that in a day. And so, that's one of the reasons I feel blessed to be doing what I do every day.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for this opportunity. I feel blessed. This has been a life-giving conversation. I'm going to give you, Frederick, the last word. Where can everyone out there in the world find out more information about Frederick Groce and Storm Ventures? You got the floor.
Yeah, well, you can engage with us on any of our social media. So if you can look at us on Twitter at Storm Ventures. You can find me on Twitter at FrederikG191. I actually do respond to all DMs if you have a question. And you can find more information about Black VC at blckvc.com. If you're out there and you're thinking about trying to find a way to break in, or trying to find a way to build your company, reach out to us. We're here to help you be successful at the end of the day. And so, don't be afraid to send us a note.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Frederick. Again, I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon.
All right, Peter. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye. True startup story time. Guys, as a founder, I'm often asked, what are my go-to tools and technology that I use as I begin a startup? Well, that's easy. One of them is Dropbox. Dropbox is the easiest way to ensure that all your files and documents are synced on all devices, whether it be mobile, your local desktop, or remote. We want to thank Dropbox for supporting vchunting.com, and make sure to get your 30-day trial free at dropbox.com/business. Well, wasn't that an energizing, entertaining, and just all around fun conversation with Frederick Groce from Storm Ventures? Man, if you watched it, you'll see closer to the end, or I was just kind of just like unhinged a little bit, right? I was just like, man, this guy Frederick, he's gonna be impacting the world. He's got purpose-driven action going on, PDA. And I just had to say that I'm excited for him. I'm excited for where he's going. And by the way, before we hit the record button, he's in wedding planning mode. So we're gonna get this thing pushed out before March, if I remember correctly. March is when he's gonna be getting married out in South Carolina. So Frederick, if you're watching, congratulations, my friend, on the marriage. It's gonna make you a better man. But there was just so many great things that came up in this conversation. The first thing that I really, really loved is the fact that he really is putting his words into action. When it comes to diversity, creating Black VC, make sure you check it out, blckvc.com. He's really trying to become or be the bridge and be a great networker, help other people, connect with each other, find those opportunities. There's more to work than work, right? There's networks to be had, there's people to meet, there's ideas to spread. And I just love the fact that he's willing to be that millennial VC, that minority millennial VC who is willing to go out there and do it and help. And I think that really is what makes a life worth living, is when you're serving others. And that was one of those things, I will say, as I was talking with him, I could just clearly see in his countenance is that he's an individual that, again, is purpose driven, but at the same time, not a but at the same time, really desires to help other people. I think he's figured out the formula, guys. One of the formulas to success in life and happiness and well-being is helping others and helping others thrive and helping others grow. I really loved our conversation around brand. It's something that I'm going to be spending a lot more time talking about this year, as I've talked about on my daily show. But it's really important as we move into 2020 and beyond. It is going to be even more imperative that you take control of your personal brand. Don't let your branding, don't let the perception of the market or your reputation on the market be relegated to a LinkedIn or be relegated to a Tweeters or a Facebook or whatever other social platforms that you subscribe to. It is time to take charge of your personal brand, to curate it and to manage it appropriately as to the message that you're trying to convey to the world and the reputation you're trying to manage in the world. And I appreciated very much the tension that kind of arose up in our conversation around this, because it really is hard to figure out the right balance between brand, reputation, being purposeful in posting versus haphazard, being authentic, right? And this is something that I've struggled with for many years, of just how to be the best version of me, how to be the authentic version of me, how to communicate my heart, my soul, and not worry about it. But I think right now, the fact that I'm just doing this I think I've gotten over it. But I will say, if you want to understand the world, make a YouTube channel. Start talking about things that are important to your life, and you'll find the entire spectrum of the world respond to you. Those who love you and those who despise you. I also loved this one of the ideas around how he has continued to stay at Storm Ventures. This is a big plug for Storm Ventures, so I'll just say it here. But having interviewed Ryan Floyd, so he was an introduction through Ryan Floyd. So go back and make sure you watch that interview as well. That Storm Ventures really is a venture fund that is focusing on making sure that they allow people to follow their passions, allow people to experiment, to try things out, to go and do different things. And they're ridiculously supportive of all the different types of people that work at Storm Ventures and their diverse interests. This is a really great plug for Storm Ventures. So if you know Storm Ventures, they're B2B, guys, they're B2B. If you know of them and you're in the B2B, you're a founder, you're an entrepreneur, check them out. Check out FREDERIK Groce, check out Ryan Floyd, check out the guys over at Storm Ventures. They're doing an awesome job, and it's been my pleasure to host now 2 of their investors here on the VC Hunting Podcast Show. Guys, again, I loved this conversation with FREDERIK. I'm almost thinking already that there are certain things that I should just ping him about, because he seems like the type of dude that is ready to do some damage, if you know what I mean. Maybe. I love doing this stuff. It's great meeting new people and having these types of conversations. If you love what you've seen here and you want to learn more, make sure that you check out vchunting.com/FREDERIK-Groce. Thanks so much, guys, for being on this and watching this. Man, I can't wait for my next interviews. It's going to be great, guys. I'll see you next time.